I killed and buried my best friend. He struggled, but died. These are words he said when his rescuers found him. So, was it murder or mercy? In August of 1999, two close friends started a 5-day road trip from Massachusetts to California. They took a break at Rattlesnake Canyon in New Mexico to camp for just one night. 4 days later, tired and thirsty, they faced a tough decision: suffer a slow, painful death or end it quickly. This is Fatal Tragedies, with the story of the two best friends, David Coughlin and Rafi Kodikian. David and Rafi became friends in college in Boston, where they met through a friend named Kristen Swan. Kristen and Rafi dated for a while, but the trio enjoyed attending parties and traveling together, forming an inseparable bond. After graduating, all three stayed in the Boston area. When Kristen and Rafi's relationship ended, Rafi and David grew even closer, with Rafi considering David almost like a brother. However, life took them in slightly different directions. David moved back to his hometown near Boston and worked as a traffic policy analyst, while Rafi pursued journalism, working at an insurance company, but also writing travel articles for the Boston Globe. David was accepted into a graduate school in California, and Rafi instantly knew they had to go on one less road trip before David moved. Eager to make this journey memorable, Rafi took some time off work and planned a 5-day trip to help David relocate. On July 30th, 1999, they loaded David's car with everything he owned and hit the road. This trip was not just about moving, it was about celebrating their friendship and the many roads they'd traveled together. Their adventure took them south, stopping first in Pennsylvania, then Nashville. In each city, they spent time with their families, played some pool, and enjoyed a few drinks, cherishing these moments together. Their next stop was Austin, Texas, where they met up with David's uncle. He recommended a detour to see the magnificent Carlsbad Caverns, adding another exciting chapter to their journey. Although visiting Carlsbad Caverns wasn't originally in their plans, David and Rafi decided to embrace the spontaneity of their road trip and detour to New Mexico. The drive took longer than expected, and they arrived late in the afternoon, too late and too tired to explore the caverns. Instead, they set up camp for the night. On Wednesday, August 4th, they finally reached Carlsbad Caverns National Park. They chose to camp at Rattlesnake Canyon, planning to stay just one night before continuing their adventure. Rattlesnake Canyon features a moderately challenging trail that stretches about 5.4 miles. Camping there in August meant dealing with daytime temperatures around 90 degrees Fahrenheit, adding a layer of challenge to their already adventurous trip. Rattlesnake Canyon, a trail less traveled by tourists, offered David and Rafi a quiet contrast to the bustling Carlsbad Caverns nearby. Most visitors preferred the famous cave system just down the road, leaving the more rugged paths like Rattlesnake Canyon mostly to themselves. On the afternoon of August 4th, the best friends approached the ranger station with excitement, ready to secure a permit for their overnight adventure in the canyon. The ranger advised them to purchase a topographical map for navigation and recommended they carry at least 1 gallon of water per person per day to stay hydrated in the intense heat. David and Rafi, neither experienced in reading topographical maps, bought one anyway, hoping for the best. They also purchased 3 pints of water and 2 bottles of Gatorade, optimistically underestimating the recommended amount. As the evening approached around 6 o'clock, Rafi and David felt the cooler air set in. Convinced that the hottest part of the day was behind them, they decided the water and Gatorade they had would be sufficient for their short overnight stay. With light hearts and light packs, they drove to the trailhead of Rattlesnake Canyon, ready for a simple adventure. Their equipment was minimal since they weren't hiking far and only staying one night. A can of corn, a can of beans, a few energy bars, hot dogs with buns, and a small propane grill for cooking. They also packed a 2-man tent and sleeping bags for the night's rest. Upon reaching the trailhead, they started their journey into the canyon. The path they chose was a secondary, less traveled one, diverging from the main route. This path, like the main one, was clearly marked by cairns, piles of white rocks placed by rangers every 50 yards to guide hikers. Following these markers, Rafi and David hiked about 1.5 miles until they found a pleasant clearing. It was there that they decided to set up camp, surrounded by the quiet solitude of nature, ready to enjoy a peaceful night under the stars. That evening, after enjoying their simple dinner of hot dogs, Rafi and David slept soundly in their tent. Waking up around 8 o'clock the next morning, they stuck to their plan, pack up and hike back to the car. The morning air was fresh as they retraced their steps, following the cairns they had relied on the previous day. Confidently navigating the familiar terrain, they soon recognized the spot from their hike in. They knew that they were just about a half mile from their car. Taking a moment to rest, they finished their last sips of water, anticipating the comfort of their car's air conditioning in just a half hour. They'd even left a bottle of Gatorade in the car as a refreshing reward for the end of their hike. Feeling rested and ready, they set off in the direction they believed led to the trailhead. However, after walking about 50 yards, the surroundings began to look unfamiliar. Realizing they had missed their turn and inadvertently followed the primary trail instead of heading back to the trailhead, the two acknowledged their mistake. It was no big deal. They would simply backtrack to the last familiar spot and correct their course. As Rafi and David retraced their steps, they discovered a few cairns scattered along a small riverbed. They searched meticulously for additional markers to guide them, but found none. Despite this setback, they weren't immediately worried. They believed they were close to where the primary and secondary trails intersected, which should have made finding their way relatively straightforward. But things were about to get even worse. Realizing they needed to find either the intersection or another recognizable spot on the trail, they decided to orient themselves using the sun. Without a compass and finding the map more confusing than helpful, they put it away, choosing instead to rely on natural cues. Their plan was to head east, toward where they remembered parking the car. However, after hours of searching without spotting any further cairns, they decided to rest in a shaded area to rethink their strategy. At this point, they realized a critical error. They'd been searching westward instead of eastward. Lacking backcountry experience and the necessary skills to navigate effectively under these conditions, they felt increasingly uncertain about what to do next. As they contemplated their options, the weather shifted and it began to rain. Quick thinking led them to collect rainwater runoff from rocks, funneling it into their containers by spitting it from their mouths, managing to gather about 3/4 of a pint each. During the search for water sources, they also came across prickly pears, which provided them with much-needed hydration and a bit of sugar. Exhausted, yet determined, Rafi and David continued their quest to locate the trail, driven by the necessity to find a way back to their car after a long, challenging day lost in the wilderness. As darkness fell, Rafi and David made the disheartening decision to set up camp for a second unplanned night, unknowingly just a stone's throw from the path that would lead them back to safety. Overwhelmed by exhaustion and dehydration, their situation grew increasingly dire. Their camp was a mere 275 feet from the trail leading to their car, a trail that remained agonizingly out of reach. Surrounded by options, each one promising a way back to civilization, they tragically chose to search westward, deeper into the barren desert. If they had ventured north or east, they would have found their salvation. Even southward led to farmland. But the unforgiving terrain to the west offered nothing but isolation. Compounded by dehydration, their cognitive functions dwindled. The very ability of their brains to process thoughts and make decisions was impaired. As they huddled by an old foundation, they misread their map, misinterpreted their surroundings, and continued in the wrong direction, each step taking them further and further from hope. By Friday, the stark reality of their plight fully set in. Vultures circled ominously above, a grim reminder of their perilous state. The birds, symbols of impending doom, sparked a dark contemplation between the friends. "We will not let the buzzards get us alive," Rafi uttered. "God forgive us." Weighed down by fatigue and despair, they discussed a heartbreaking notion: suicide as an escape from a fate at the claws and beaks of the circling scavengers. In this bleak moment, their thoughts turned to survival, not from the elements, but from a fate they deemed worse than death itself. The wilderness, with its indifferent beauty, watched silently as they grappled with their dire predicament, a testament to the harsh realities that nature can unveil. As they returned to their camp, their strength waning, Rafi and David resigned themselves to their fate. Too weak to continue their search, they decided to wait for help to come to them, whether from a passing hiker or a ranger on patrol. As they sat near the old foundation, the grip of dehydration tightened its hold on their minds. Hallucinations crept in, offering cruel glimpses of salvation. David swore he saw bottles of water nestled at the foundation's base, and in their desperate hope, Rafi too believed he could see them. Rushing to the spot, they found only emptiness. This crushing disappointment plunged them deeper into despair. Their spirits shattered, and they descended into a state of utter desolation. The night offered no respite, only agony and torment. Dehydrated and racked with pain, they found little solace in sleep, plagued instead by nightmares of perishing alone in the unforgiving desert. As Saturday dawned, marking their third day stranded in the scorching heat with dwindling water supplies, their ordeal showed no signs of relenting. Each passing hour weighed heavily on their weary bodies and shattered spirits. As experts later analyzed the tragic events, they concluded that by this time, Rafi and David were utterly depleted, lacking the strength to extricate themselves from the canyon. Recognizing the gravity of their situation, they turned to their journal, penning heartfelt goodbye messages to their loved ones, resigned to their grim fate in the barren desert. With hope extinguished and desperation mounting, they contemplated a final, desperate act. They retrieved Rafi's knife, intending to end their suffering, but in their weakened state, they couldn't bring themselves to follow through. Sunday brought only agony and despair. David's body convulsed with excruciating cramps, racked by violent bouts of vomiting that threatened to suffocate him. In this harrowing moment, Rafi, his loyal friend, became his lifeline, clearing David's airway and offering him what little comfort he could amidst the overwhelming despair. Through the long, torturous night, sleep eluded them both. David's cries for help pierced the darkness, his body contorted with pain, begging for release. In his anguish, he pleaded with Rafi to end his suffering, a request Rafi could neither grant nor deny. In this somber moment, faced with an impossible choice, Rafi acted. He took out his 4-inch knife blade and plunged it into David's chest. With a heavy heart, Rafi withdrew the knife, and as air escaped David's chest, a grim realization dawned. He hadn't found his heart, but had punctured his lung. In a moment fraught with unbearable anguish, Rafi knew what needed to be done. David's calm acceptance mirrored Rafi's resolve as he steeled himself for the unthinkable. "I have to do it again," Rafi murmured, his voice laden with sorrow. "Okay," David replied softly, his trust unwavering in his friend's hands. With trembling hands and a heavy heart, Rafi plunged the knife once more, this time finding its mark. As David's life ebbed away, Rafi cradled his friend's hand, offering what solace he could in those final moments. With gentle reverence, he covered David's face with his shirt, a silent tribute to the life lost far too soon. Around 1:30 p.m. on August 8th, Park Ranger Lance Matson stood by a maroon Mazda from Massachusetts, overlooking the vast canyon below. The camping permit assigned to the vehicle had been issued for 2 men, just a 4-day stay, yet they hadn't returned. As he scanned the rugged terrain, Matson couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss. With a sense of urgency, he set out on foot, accompanied by a park volunteer, toward the Rattlesnake Canyon trail. After a challenging trek across the mountainside, Matson finally reached the campsite, but it was eerily empty. Just as he began to worry, a figure emerged from under a tent, disheveled and desperate. "Please, tell me you have water," gasped Rafi, his voice strained with exhaustion. With concern etched on his face, Matson offered a bottle, watching as Rafi drank greedily, his body betraying the signs of severe dehydration. "Where's your buddy?" Matson inquired, searching the surrounding area for any sign of the missing camper. "Over there," Rafi replied, his voice trembling as he pointed towards the rocky expanse beyond, but there was no one in sight. Confusion clouded Matson's mind as he pressed for more information. Then, in a voice choked with emotion, Rafi uttered the words that sent a chill down Matson's spine. "I killed him." As the story unfolded, only one man survived to tell what happened in the desert. Rafi's version of events, backed by experts and park rangers, became the main story. Rafi's lawyers argued that he killed David out of mercy and not out of any form of malice, and it wasn't an unusual criminal case. It was a strange and tragic situation that the two men had found themselves in. Despite the seriousness of the situation, many people believed Rafi's story, including the prosecutor as well as David's family. David's family even wrote a collective letter to the court asking for Rafi to get a lighter sentence. And it worked. Rafi got a shorter sentence, 2 years in prison, with another 13 years on hold. During his probationary period, Rafi showed he was really sorry for what had happened. He served most of his time, got off probation, and since then, he's been a good member of society. Everyone who knew Rafi and David says that Rafi's a good guy and an incredibly loyal friend. They stand by Rafi's story, even though it's sad and a very tough one to believe. Thanks for joining us on this journey through an incredible story of friendship, survival, and tough choices. Now, before you go, here's a question to ponder. When faced with life's toughest decisions, what would you choose? The slow, painful path or a quick resolution? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more captivating content. We'll see you in the next video.